also saw a story yesterday about college football, and CBS Sports put out their top 10 quarterbacks of power rankings going into the season, and Jayden Daniels made the list at number 9. I'm on with my buddy Sean Fox every week up in Monroe on Thursdays, and was talking to Foxy yesterday, and something that had come up about spring football with LSU is there going to be a quarterback competition? And I know that this has been talked about a little bit, but CBS Sports put out their top 10 quarterbacks, and it was interesting to see where they had Daniels ranked at number 9 in the country. And the write-up, real quick, I'll read for you. It says, Jayden Daniels played well for LSU last season, and while I considered ranking him higher, some believe there's a chance, slim as it may be, that Daniels won't be LSU's starter come the fall. Maybe that'll be the case, but if LSU starts the year ranked in the top 10 and is viewed as a playoff contender, Daniels' 2022 performance will be a big reason why he has to be included here in the top 10 for CBS. This was written up by Tom Fornelli over at CBS Sports. This is what I'm referencing. The rest of the rankings look like this, and I don't have much of a problem with them. Caleb Williams is at 1 for USC. Michael Penix Jr., who was a bit of a surprise going back to Washington, and the Huskies, is in at 2. Drake May is 3rd on the list. Jordan Travis, who opens up the season versus LSU, is a top 4 quarterback, according to CBS Sports, as he comes in at number 4. Bo Nix at 5. Michael Pratt down at Tulane, who can say that he beat Caleb Williams and USC in the Cotton Bowl. J.J. McCarthy, number 7 for CBS, coming in from Michigan. Sam Hartman, who transferred over to Notre Dame from Wake Forest in the offseason, is in at number 8. You've got Jayden Daniels at 9, and you've got Dylan Gabriel, who is up at Oklahoma, rounding out the top 10. And I agree with having Daniels on this list. I also agree that Daniels is going to be in a quarterback competition. Right? I mean, I think that Daniels has earned the right, just like Brian Kelly has said, to be the number 1 quarterback on LSU going into spring. But as every position, every single day in competition is always happening, somebody's coming after the job. And I got to imagine that the motivation that Garrett Nussmeier could take away from last season, especially the way that he ended it in the SEC title game, in just his individual performance, gave him a little, mental boost going into the offseason that, hey, I got a shot to play. I got a chance, a real chance to play. And so, maybe there is a little bit closer of a competition. I would also say the same for Jayden Daniels. I think that Daniels, like we talked about a lot last year, I think probably outperformed what he thought was going to be, possible for him stepping into LSU. I think there was a brief period where he didn't know if he was going to be the starter. Then he became the starter, and for the first 5 or 6 weeks, people were trying to unseat him as the starter. And then he really kind of started to catch some momentum as mid-October and November started to roll around, and by the end of the year, he was the guy. Before the injury at Texas A&M, I mean, he was the best quarterback for LSU's 2022 team, and I think it's non-debatable. I mean, I know I never fell into the conversation of they should be playing somebody else at quarterback last year. I was always secure with the fact that, hey, look, Daniels has to be the guy. You need his skill set or that type of skill set, and he's the only one that can bring that. But now you go into a offseason where the stories have changed at LSU. Not much, but they have. Still got a wealth of talent at wide receiver, which is going to help the quarterback out. But the offensive line is now a little bit more secure. Not a little bit, I'd say a lot more secure going into this season. Not only from an experience standpoint, but starting to build some realistic depth. Some real guys that you can look at, and if somebody goes down, whether it's on the road, at home, second half, first half, big series, you can say, hey, get in there. It's your time. And that's where they've been lacking the past couple of cycles, is having that real depth and that real experience of, guys that have played significant amounts of football. And I think that takes pressure off of the quarterback. Obviously it does, right? I mean, last year, Jayden Daniels was needed because his skill set was he could keep plays alive. If the protection broke down, he could get out of the pocket, keep some time, make a play, and give you the best chance to have a successful offense. That's what LSU needed last year. And Daniels was fantastic at that. He was a lot better at it than I thought he was going to be once it really clicked for him. I mean, he became a threat to throw it. I mean, people had to respect his ability to throw it down the stretch. And, his ability with the run and the pass of what that type of pressure can do for a defense, that's tough to match. I mean, that's in today's football world when, coordinators, offensive play callers are looking for dual threat and run pass options at the quarterback and everybody being accounted for. Jayden Daniels is about as close to the prototype as you can find. So I do believe that Daniels is the starting quarterback at LSU going into spring. But I also believe that Nussmeier is nipping on his heels and letting him know that, hey, there's not a lot of room for error here. And I don't anticipate that they lose either one of these guys. I was asked yesterday if there's a starter named out of spring, which I don't anticipate there to be. I think it'll just kind of naturally play its way out, and you'll be able to pick it up on who's the guy, on what's the rotation, on what's the sense of who they want to play. And I believe that both guys will be intact. If it would have been 3, if Walker Howard was still here, I think you would have been on the same cycle as you were last year. Of you're destined to lose one. Somebody knows that they're 2 plays away rather than 1 play away from going out there. So, I think that obviously this quarterback race at LSU is going to be locally. I think it's going to be fascinating. I think nationally people are kind of writing it off and saying that Daniels is the guy, and I get that, but I don't think it's just. I don't think it's just. It's his. I think there's going to be a real competition for this job. I mean, I do. I think that each week, that this thing moves on, going into spring, is going to ratchet up the competition. I mean, I really think that you're going to come out of competition with, 2 guys who feel motivated going into the offseason and into fall that they have an opportunity to play next year. And leaving and going somewhere else doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, really.
No, not at all.
You don't want to reset, start over. For a guy like Walker Howard who's got a lot of time in football left, that makes some sense. I mean, you can go and you still got a lot of football left to play in front of you. But, for a guy like Nussmeier who's, his clock has been ticking.
Yeah.
I mean, it's time. And, I mean, obviously Daniels, I mean, he's a senior. I mean, he's got nowhere to go, really, in the sense of, I mean, you got to play now and you got to play here. So, it's going to be a good competition. I really believe that. I mean, I really think that, it's going to be a true competition. I think, like I said, Daniels will get the first crack, and like Brian Kelly said post bowl game, that they're going to respect him and treat him as the starter and as the number 1 guy, but they also know that they've got capable depth and backups behind Daniels who can play at this level, and they proved it last year. So, but I also think that Brian Kelly knows so well how to handle these conversations and handle the public sentiment on this and the way that he presents it to the public. I thought last year was a masterclass of keeping three guys at the same position engaged, motivated, and bought in, as it felt like all three of them, really thought that they could win the job. And that's probably really tough to do internally. I think that, to keep three guys that are playing the same position who don't see, a lot of promise or believe there is promise, that's tough to build from a head coaching standpoint. And I thought Kelly last year really, he handled that brilliantly. But, you think about the makeup of this LSU team now and the skill set of the quarterback position. Last year, the box you had to check if you were going to play quarterback at LSU was you had to be mobile. You had to be a threat to run the football because the offensive line was so unproven and still so young and so many question marks that they were going to have to figure this thing out really on the fly. Now come back for another season, year 2 under Brian Kelly. They've done a tremendous job of building the stability of the offensive line early on. Brad Davis deserves a ton of credit in the way that he has recruited, developed, and brought these guys in ready to play. Obviously, I don't know how many Emory Jones and Will Campbells there are in the world, but for some reason, LSU got 2 of them in the same cycle, and both of these guys are going to play a ton of football before they're both first-round picks and stalwarts in the league for, a decade plus. But now you've got bookend talents that you can count on. You've got a center that's played a season of football, or at least you've got a guy on the roster that has the experience of playing a season of football at center. And then you've got a lot of young talent infused with some guys coming back who's played football. I'm thinking guys like Miles Frazier to Lance Hurd. You've got guys that have played a ton of football, and you've got a 5-star coming in who's ready to play all the football. So the offensive line, in my opinion, is really going to be one of the strong points of the team at some point. Like at some point they're going to exude and, kind of shuffle up to the front of the pack as, maybe the best unit on the team, or at least one of them. Most dependable. And if that's the fact, well, you still want to have a mobile quarterback. You still want a guy back there that's a threat. You still want somebody that if it breaks down or if you have to make a play, they can. And LSU, luckily, with Nussmeier and Daniels, has that guy. I think Nuss is a little bit more athletic than he showed off, and he's not scared to make a play with his feet. But ideally, you'd like to just kind of keep that guy clean, protect him, and put the ball in the hands of all these freak athletes on the outside. Right? If there was one drawback from Daniels last season and kind of trying to find his way and, starting to ride the bike with the training wheels and kicking the training wheels off, was that the production of the wide receivers, which was without a doubt, best room in the program last year. that was the room with the most talent last season, really underperformed, and I don't think it was all their fault. I think that there were some things that they could have done better, but it wasn't all because of them. And then once Nussmeier gets into the game late in the season, you see the ball again, whipped down the field, and Malik Neighbors and, guys are making plays over the top. Brian Thomas, just plays that you're like, whoa, this is a different matchup if you're LSU. That was Georgia. They were putting pressure on. They were never a threat to win the game, but you could see Georgia was struggling with the style in which they were throwing at them. So I think the ask is different on the quarterback. I think it's a different responsibility this year. And if Nussmeier can't protect the ball, then he's out of the race. Early on when you saw him against Southern and you saw him in some spots, you were, it was very evident and clear, at least to me. And I remember saying at the time, oh, now I understand on why he wasn't pushing for the competition really that hard. He doesn't protect the ball. And coaches put, a premium, obviously. I mean, that's, it's a very obvious statement of not turning the ball over. And Daniels was a little overprotective at the start of it, right? And once he started to take a couple of shots and try to fit it in a couple of windows that he looked at early in the season and decided against, I mean, LSU started to become a little bit more productive on that side of the ball. So, Don Gill, Georgia never struggled. Again, Don, listen to what I said. They were never a threat. LSU was never a threat to win the game. But when LSU started pushing the ball down the field and throwing the ball down the field with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and Mason Taylor, when they were pushing it down the field, that's when Georgia looked as if they were a little confused. By no means were they getting beat. But that was the formula. It's the same formula that C.J. Stroud and Ohio State used a couple of weeks later when they brought all those freaks in at wide receiver. I'd imagine they looked at the LSU film when they were saying, fellas, look, they were moving the ball on these guys with, Kayshon Boutte and Malik Neighbors and, all these wide receivers that are very comparable to what we got. And that was Nussmeier that was throwing it over their head. So, look, by no means am I saying that they had Georgia on the ropes. They had a style. They threw a style at Georgia where Georgia was a little wobbly. I mean, they were a little, they kind of had their head on the swivel, kind of looking like, what's going on? This is, it's, you got two quarterbacks that can play at a high level, man. LSU's sitting again in a very good spot. I mean, last year at this time, we were talking about three guys that you could win with in the SEC. Miles Brennan, Garrett Nussmeier, and Jayden Daniels. This season, you still got both of those guys in Daniels and Nussmeier who had the most experience and now can, really has the confidence of the competition that they can be the starter, both of them, going into another season. I don't think you lose either of them. I think you keep both guys in the program, and LSU is going to be sitting in a really good spot at quarterback, for at least for the upcoming season. And I'm hearing really good things about Ricky Collins. There's another youngster in the program that's proving he's worthy of the, Power 5 scholarship and pressure that comes along with, at some point you're going to be the guy.
Been screaming it for 3 years.
Huh?
I said I've been screaming it for 3 years.
Got a whip. Man. He's once he learns what he's looking at, he's been counting on a lot of guys just running past, and his talent of just kind of putting it into windows of, not allowing high school kids to be able to defend and, and he's going to get it because he's a very smart kid and he loves football. And, he's got two guys that he can look up to that are going through it right now that can give him a little bit of a roadmap of how to form his own path. And when it's his time, it's going to be his time. And I think, more importantly than anything, what LSU has done at the quarterback position, and I think you can compliment, this goes back to Burrow, is they've got on a natural cycle now where you don't have to, you don't have to freak out and blow people's eligibility when it's not time to do that. You don't have to play them before their clock should really start. We there's so many examples and lists of guys along the way that, LSU has just played way too early and asked way too much of before it was their time to really step onto the scene, that now they've got this natural cycle of veterans fighting for the starting job and young guys not having the pressure to play immediately and being able to kind of get into the program, get developed, and wait their time to get onto the field. So, that's a great spot where they're at, and they got to continue to, recruit the quarterback at a high level. But, when you have three guys on the roster like they were, like they've had, and they kind of lost Walker Howard a little sooner than I thought they were going to lose the quarterback. I thought Howard was going to go through spring, and then one of them was going to leave. but Howard ended up leaving before spring. If you've got 3 guys on the roster, at some point Ricky Collins, comes in and plays, and like 2 years from now, you've got 2 guys that feel like they can play, and there's a younger guy that feels like he's a 5-star that should be, cracking. I mean, you're going to lose one. I mean, it's just kind of that's the nature of the position. And with college football, with college sports, there's rules now where you can jump into the transfer portal, you can be on a different team tomorrow, you can be playing by tomorrow night. It's easy to do.